Welcome to story number 6. From Baseball, Boobs, and the Babe. My father never saw the store. For 3 decades, Debbie and I owned Nick's Sports Cards in Dallas. During those years, we met Hall of Fame athletes, professional gamblers, future millionaires, politicians, collectors, dreamers, and enough colorful characters to populate a small Texas town. Most of the stories from those years happened inside the store. But every once in a while, a story comes along that isn't really about the business at all. It's about the road that led there. This story begins long before Nick's Sports Cards ever opened its doors. Long before the customers. Long before the autograph signings. Long before the business became successful. It begins with a skinny little Oklahoma kid walking ditches looking for pop bottles so he could buy baseball cards. And it ends with one of the few regrets I still carry today. My father never lived long enough to see what those baseball cards eventually became. He died before Debbie and I ever opened Nick's Sports Cards. Before the store. Before the success. Before 30 years of stories. And that's a shame. Because if anybody deserved to see the ending, it was him. You see, my baseball card addiction started when I was 7 years old. Back then, I lived in a small Oklahoma town where a kid could still roam the neighborhood all day, and nobody called the police. I spent my summers walking ditches looking for empty pop bottles. Not soda bottles. Pop bottles. That's how Aki's said it. The going rate was 2 cents a bottle. I'd gather every bottle I could find, cash them in, and save every penny until I had enough money to buy baseball cards. To a 7-year-old kid, a handful of packs felt like winning the lottery. The local grocery store redeemed bottles. What I discovered was that employees stacked the empties in wooden cases that held 24 bottles each and left them behind the store waiting for the Coke truck. Now here's the funny part. Years later, I worked at the Oklahoma City Coca-Cola plant. One of my jobs was unloading those very same bottle racks off the trucks. Apparently, life has a sense of humor. Unfortunately, so did temptation. One day, I looked at one of those cases sitting behind the grocery store and thought, why collect 24 bottles one at a time when I can just turn in the whole case? Even at 7 years old, I was already looking for efficiency. Or as my father would have called it, stealing. The employees all knew me. Nobody questioned where the bottles came from. The cashier counted them up and handed me 48 cents. 48 cents. I was rich. That's almost 5 packs of baseball cards. In 7-year-old economics, I was basically Warren Buffett. A few days later, I decided to repeat my brilliant business strategy. Unfortunately, this time Mr. Davidson, the store manager, was working, and Mr. Davidson wasn't just the manager. He was also one of the church deacons. In a small Oklahoma town, that's a dangerous combination. He looked at the case. Then he looked at me. Then he asked, Nicky, where'd you get all these bottles? Now let me explain something. In my house, stealing wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a learning experience. It wasn't a teachable moment. It was a death sentence. I started mumbling something about finding them in ditches, Mr. Davidson listened patiently. Then he said, that's interesting. I put this exact case of bottles out back earlier today. Well, the jig was up. I confessed everything. To his credit, Mr. Davidson seemed mildly impressed by the creativity. But then he delivered the real punishment. You're going to have to tell your father. At that moment, I would have preferred prison. My parents had 4 simple rules. Don't lie. Don't cheat. Don't steal. Don't be disrespectful. My mother had a 5th rule. No chewing gum ever. This created a strange situation. I collected baseball cards, but I couldn't chew the gum that came with them. Mom had the nose of a bloodhound. That woman could detect chewing gum from a block away. People always asked why she hated gum so much. Her answer never changed. I will not have my children walking around looking like cows chewing cud. For years, I thought that was ridiculous. Then one day, I watched a football coach on television chewing gum on the sidelines. He looked like a beaver trying to eat a fence post. And suddenly, Mom made perfect sense. To this day, I don't chew gum. I don't think any of my 3 siblings do either. Walking home that day, I spent the entire trip wondering what my punishment would be. The belt. Being grounded. Getting banned from sports. None of the options looked promising. When I got home, I told my father everything. He listened quietly. Then he asked, how many times did you do it? I told him twice. The sentence came down immediately. I had to collect enough bottles to repay 96 cents. 96 cents. Now remember, I only got paid for one case, but arguing that point seemed like a terrible career move. To a 7-year-old kid, 96 cents might as well have been $96. On top of that, I was grounded from baseball cards for an entire month. A month. That was cruel and unusual punishment in my book. My father never really understood my fascination with baseball cards. But he understood boys. And Lord knows he had one that kept him busy. When I was growing up in Nakoma Park, I seemed determined to test both gravity and my mother's patience. At 12 years old, I once rode a Rock Island freight train because I thought it would save me a little walking on my way to buy baseball cards. The plan worked beautifully. Right up until the moment I had to jump off. I came flying out of that boxcar at a railroad crossing, while two of our neighbors sat there and watched the whole thing. In a town the size of Nakoma Park, the news spread faster than the train. You might think my father was furious. Not really. My mother was the one who worried. Dad always seemed to have a little appreciation for my Tom Sawyer approach to life. I remember him asking me one day, "Nick, are you stealing watermelons?" I knew better than to lie. "Yes, sir." He thought about it for a second and said, "Well, bring one home every once in a while." That answer still makes me laugh. Mom, on the other hand, was considerably less enthusiastic about my adventures. Looking back now, I can't imagine the worry I put that woman through. Every day seemed to bring a new adventure, a new close call, or a new reason for the neighbors to shake their heads. There's an old Oklahoma saying that boys are born with two jobs, testing gravity and testing their mother's patience. I was exceptionally gifted at both. And if my mother is listening from heaven today, I'd like to apologize. But looking back, I think a small part of my father admired the entrepreneurial thinking. Not the stealing part. The business part. I just wish he had lived long enough to see where those 10-cent packs eventually led. Because those cards became the foundation of our vintage inventory at Nick's Sports Cards. Looking back now, I realize this story was never really about baseball cards. It was about lessons. My father taught me that honesty matters. My mother taught me that character matters. And both taught me that actions have consequences. And somewhere along the way, those lessons became a whole lot more valuable than the cards. At the time, 96 cents felt like a fortune. Today, I understand that the lesson was worth far more than the money. The funny thing is, when you're young, you think life is happening one day at a time. What you don't realize is that life is quietly building a story. One decision, one lesson, one mistake at a time. I often wonder what my father would have thought if he had walked into Nick's Sports Cards and seen customers lined up around the store buying the very thing that got me into trouble as a kid. I think he would have smiled. I think he would have been proud. And I know he would have reminded me that success means a whole lot more when you earn it the right way. I'd give just about anything to have him walk through that front door one time. To show him the store. To introduce him to Debbie. To let him see what those baseball cards eventually became. But life doesn't give us that opportunity. Sometimes all we get is gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons. Gratitude for the memories. And gratitude for the people who helped build the foundation long before we ever understood what they were building. My father never saw the store. He never saw the customers. He never saw the autograph signings. He never saw 30 years of stories. But the store never would have existed without him. And that's something I've never forgotten. Thank you for joining me for story number 6 from Baseball, Boobs, and the Babe. And next time, I'll tell you about one of the most unforgettable customers we ever had. A customer so memorable that people still ask me about him years later. Let's just say, when he walked into the store, you knew it immediately. Story number 7, The Stinky Guy, and trust me, that nickname wasn't an accident.